Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to my podcast, Rewire to Inspire. I am your host, Jessie Brown, and I am super excited to be jumping on the microphone with you all for episode number 161. If you missed my last episode, number 160, I shared with you guys all about the pros and cons of the famous quote, living today like it's your last day. That was genuinely one of my favorite episodes that I have ever recorded. And so if you haven't checked out that episode, I definitely encourage you to. Before we dive into today's episode, number 161, I just wanted to say a big thank you to everybody who has been tuning in on my YouTube platform. We have been growing over on that platform, and it genuinely means the world to me when you guys leave feedback below, when you guys subscribe to the channel. It just lets me know that you guys are there and listening and that content is landing. And so if you ever have feedback, if you ever have anything you want to share, I definitely just want to grant you that permission and know that that is how I grow. That is how I improve. And it is always just more helpful to know if things are landing or if they're not, so that I can kind of shift and adapt what I am doing. Because at the end of the day, I want this show to be impactful and knowing that it's making an impact. So I just wanted to say a very quick thank you to each and every one of you. And if you didn't know, I have a YouTube platform. I will put a link to it in the description below so that you guys can go check it out. It is the exact same as the audio, except for you get to see my face in my office, which is kind of cool. So anyways, nonetheless, you guys, I hope your guys' September is continuing to just go amazing. It is crazy to think that we are in the second half of September. Gosh, it's going way too fast. I am just eagerly waiting for the trees to change around me. I love the fall. And so I'm just really excited for all the fall things that are kind of coming our way. So nonetheless, super excited to be jumping on the microphone with you all for today's episode. Today's episode is going to be a mental health related topic, which, as you know, my whole podcast is prefaced around mental health. And today I want to dive into 5 ways that you can improve your mental health, which I know is a big statement to make, but these are things that I like to do on a day-to-day basis or as often as possible, and that really support me in my mental health. Here's the thing, you guys. Inevitably, I believe that we all want to improve our overall mental health. However, sometimes it can be really overwhelming to figure out where to start with that. What is kind of the source of my harder days? What is the source when my mental health is just spiraling or is heavier or is affecting me more than usual? And I want you guys to know that even now as a mental health professional and somebody who is very passionate about talking about mental health, I was in denial for a lot of my life that I had traumas, that I had childhood trauma, that I had experiences that posed harm. And I never used to identify that those butterflies in my stomach and my heart beating fast and feeling overwhelmed was anxiety. And I never used to know that going into deep spirals was depression and dissociation. And it wasn't until I started to study and learn and understand trauma that a lot of those experiences began to be validated for me. And I think that when we're in that denial state, or if we're just undereducated, it can cause shame to be so much worse. Because if we don't know why something's affecting us, we don't understand how it's going to impact us and affect us, it can cause us to feel alone in our experiences. And I know for that so much of my life, that's how I felt. Like nobody else must experience this. This just must be a me thing. And in a lot of ways, I just thought that that was a part of being a teenager, a part of being an adult, was you felt those emotions. And so I think because I didn't have the understanding of why I was feeling them, I got really good at suppressing them. And I know that having worked with hundreds of clients and being able to provide that psychoeducation to my clients, one of the biggest things that they would always say is, now that I understand it, I'm less resistant to feeling it because I know that it's my body's way of communicating with me. I know that's my body's way of trying to tell me something. But unfortunately, these things aren't taught to us, or they weren't taught to me. And I think that's now why I'm so passionate about overcorrecting this and making sure that our youth get this information, because if we do not know why or how to look after ourselves in this way, it makes it a lot worse. Because there's nothing worse than when experiences impact us. And then when we don't know how to deal with that, we make it worse for ourselves because we think there's something wrong with us. And when we start to have resistance or a bad relationship with our own body and mind, that is one of the worst places that we can be in. And it doesn't allow us the permission and that safe space to heal. One thing that I had wrote down that I think is super powerful is they often say we become, as adults, what we wish we would have had as a child or at a time in our life. And I think that that's because we use a lot of pain as motivation to make an impact and to overcorrect so that nobody else has to feel the pain that we did. And that is exactly what this episode today is for me. And it's very largely coming from my heart. And I truly hope that this helps even one person to support you on your mental health journey. And these are all things that I think could be beneficial despite any particular experiences that you have gone through. I think that these are all things that can serve each and every one of us to some degree. Last thing that I want to note before I dive into the 5 ways is mental health affects all of us differently. There are fundamental things that we are wired the same, and certain impacts can be similar, but how you feel that impact versus how I do is going to be different. What would be considered a trauma to you might not be considered traumatic to me. And so I just want you to know that, as always, I encourage you to seek professional support. Always, always, always lean on the side of caution. If you are feeling like you need extra help, know that you are so deserving to that. And know that you are not alone. Therapy has so much shame and stigma around it. But I know that I would not be in a place now to be able to talk about these things if I didn't first do the inner work and do the healing, because it was too triggering to talk about these things. And so, to put things simply, I just want to share these things with you because these are things that we can do on a day-to-day basis to support ourselves. And I think that when we have those things proactively, it's just so much better than trying to be reactive all the time and trying to play catch up with ourselves. And so the goal of today is to set you guys up with 5 different ways that you can proactively support your mental health. If you can hear the train in the background, I do apologize again. Last time, I think there was a car going crazy in the background, and I listened back to the audio and I couldn't actually hear it. But if you can hear that, there is train tracks not too far behind my house. But nonetheless, you guys, the first way that I wrote down that we can support our mental health is something that took me a long time to do. But now that I do it on a daily basis, I notice a difference on the days that I don't do this. And that is to, when you wake up in the morning, look at yourself in the mirror. Make eye contact with yourself. It's very uncomfortable to do for the first couple of times. I still get uncomfortable sometimes. If my self-worth is lower on those days, I'm like, I don't want to look at her. I don't want to tend to that. But what I do when I look at myself in the mirror is I identify what emotion that I'm feeling. And I've showed you guys my feelings wheel many of times on this podcast. I will also link that below because I think that it's one of my most used tools that I can recommend to people. The reason it's so powerful is because trauma can very strongly and mental health can very strongly come in, and it can interfere with our mind-body connection. And on the days that we're feeling disconnected, one of the best things that we can do is we ground ourselves and we identify what we're feeling. Because if we don't know what we're feeling, it can be really easy to spiral. It can be easy for us to lose touch with ourselves. And when we lose touch with ourselves, we don't know what our needs and our wants are. If we don't know what our needs and our wants are, then we can't tend to them and we can't act accordingly. And so know that, again, this exercise is harder on the days where you might be in a lower state, but I think that that also gives yourself and grants yourself that permission to validate how you're feeling. I said this, it was either on the last episode or the one before. Emotions are emotions are emotions. We have categorized them as being positive or negative. What if instead we just viewed all emotions as they are? It is a feeling and a sensation based off of how we are in that moment. If you are having a sadder day, it's kind of funny. If you're having a day that you feel more sad, that doesn't make it less of an impactful day than if you are feeling really good. Today is a day for me where my mental health is definitely struggling. And I find on those days, I just want to shut down. I can't really be around other people. Even though in hindsight, I know that that's exactly what I need, is because it's typically because I'm needing validation. But today was just a harder day for me. But I'm not viewing it as a bad day. I'm still showing up and I get to talk to you guys, which is always something that fills my cup so deeply. But so that is the first thing that I recommend you guys to do, is to, when you get up in the morning, maybe when you're brushing your teeth, look at yourself in the mirror and make eye contact. Get to know you. And ask yourself, what emotion am I feeling? Maybe printing off a feelings chart and putting that in your bathroom would be helpful for you, because there's times when we just say very surface level emotions, but it's typically deeper than that. And then furthermore, if you want to practice this before you go to bed, I think would also be really impactful. What was my answer in the morning versus at night? What shifted throughout the day? What did I do throughout the day? Again, I think this just really allows us to recognize when we're out of our window of tolerance. It allows us to ground ourselves, and it allows us to check in. Check-in questions are always one of the first things that I used to start with my clients. What is your relationship with yourself? Our mental health will always feel this like we're off when we're disconnected. And one of the best ways that we can reconnect is to get in tune and in touch with our emotions. Number 2, this is one I talk about all the time, but this one will very quickly derail or improve your mental health. That is to notice the things that you are telling yourself. Notice your internal dialogue. Notice your internal conversations. What is your go-to tendencies that you tell yourself in your mind? Are you even aware of them? Or are they just playing in the background all the time? Are you conscious when you tell yourself hurtful things? Knowing that inevitably that is impacting you. And I think it's important that we take intentional time throughout the day to notice the things we're telling ourselves. One thing I've recommended on here before, and one thing I like to tell students whenever I'm speaking to classrooms, is I want you to identify something in the classroom. And every time you look at that thing, you ask yourself a check-in question. So one thing that we had said was, as soon as they walked through the door, there was this sun on the wall. Whenever you see that sun, I want you to ask yourself a question. When you can start to associate, it's like classical conditioning. When we can start to associate things together, it primes our mind more to switch into that dialogue. So what is something you can identify for yourself that every time you pick something up, you take a drink of water, you get to a red light, you're eating your breakfast, you're brushing your teeth, you can associate with something else? Allow that to be a moment to check in with what your self-talk is, especially when you're super stressed, you're super tired. That negative dialogue often gets louder, which makes it worse. Even today, before I jumped on the podcast, there was a part of me that's like, I do not want to record today. I am exhausted. Even in my voice, I can hear that I'm a little more tired, but our mind will always give up quicker than we actually have the capability to do something. It's the same when you're in the gym or when you're working out. You can always go so much further physically than your mind tells you that you can. But what is your relationship to that? Do you allow it to win and take a back seat, or do you push through? Knowing that each time we push through and we change our brain and we prove it wrong, it's actually neurologically changing. It's building susceptibility. I was reading or listening to a video a couple weeks ago, and it said one of the best things you can do as children and into adulthood is to complete a task start to finish, because that neural pathway begins to form a clear path. Whereas when we start something and end something and start something and end something, there's no track for it to go on. Meaning kids that start and end a task as adults are more likely to be susceptible to finish something, which I thought was pretty cool. But we can rewire that as adults as well. But I think that when we don't notice our self-talk, it's really easy for that self-talk to get louder than our actions, and we stop doing things. How you talk to yourself matters so deeply. And I wish that this was something that, again, was taught to us from a young age. This is one of my favorite topics that I speak on in schools. Do you know that the thoughts you're telling yourself are impacting you? Because if you're not aware of that, it will likely be this negative self-fulfilling prophecy that's happening over and over again in your mind without you even realizing it, knowing that we have 80% negative thoughts in the run of a day. So it's inevitable that at some point in your day, you are having a negative thought. The more that we can catch that and change that and release that, our mental health is inevitably going to feel the positive repercussions of that. Number 3, I talk about this all the time because this is something that is my biggest piece of advice. If someone asks me, what is the biggest piece of advice you could give to yourself when you were younger, or to a youth now, or just to anybody, that is to eliminate the things out of your life that you know are not serving you. Whenever we do something, show up to something, invest in something that we know is not in alignment or is not fulfilling us or is not aligned with your values, you're stepping away from a part of you. Knowing that every time we step away from a part of us, our mental health is going to feel that because we're neglecting ourselves. Our mental health takes a plunge when we go outside of our values. And so I think that this is also an important time to mention, do you know what your values are? I think that, again, trauma, shame, mental health can come in. And when we start to lose that connection with ourselves, we can begin to lose connection with the things that we value and feel like we're unworthy to value things, feel like we're unworthy to have specific things and needs that we want. I know that my podcast can be very broad of a spectrum, and that's because I've worked with such diverse clients of being on such low ends of mental health and such successful, high-end, healed individuals. I can see both dualities. And so I always want my podcast to kind of be centered, but I always go to the worst case scenario because I think that if we're in denial that those situations exist, and you also never know that somebody could be on the lower end of this, because we can be really good at putting on a facade, but I always go very deep trauma-informed perspective because I also want everybody to feel welcomed in this space, that if I'm saying certain things and they feel impossible, they feel overwhelming, know that that's okay. And that's because you've gone through some stuff that has hurt you and that you've likely built these protectors around you to keep yourself safe. And so eliminating the things in your life that aren't serving you, if shame comes in and it just says, oh, I'm not worthy of more, I want you to know that that is hurting your mental health so deeply. And I want you to know that I'm so sorry you feel that way. And with proper support and therapy, that can and will get better. I know that because I used to be in that space where I would keep friendships in my life, knowing very well intuitively and consciously that they weren't serving me and they weren't in alignment and that they were really hurtful. But because I didn't think that I was worthy of more, I stayed in those spaces. And my mental health would just get worse day by day by day because I was neglecting the one person who mattered the most, myself. Where in your life are you neglecting yourself? Are you choosing other people's needs above your own? Are you putting other people before you? Knowing that inevitably that's going to obviously affect our mental health. If our work is constantly just putting us down, we don't feel valued, we don't feel a sense of purpose and pride and passion, our mental health is going to take a toll. And if this is holistically the orbit that we're living in, guess what? We're going to continue to attract things that reiterate those thoughts for us. And so again, I encourage you to work with someone that can help you kind of heal some of these things. But I would encourage you to start by noticing how your body feels around certain persons, places, things, and ideas. You will likely intuitively know, even if you don't feel worthy to get out of it, a part of you will be like, I don't like that. I don't respect that person because they don't respect me. I don't like how I feel around that person. Knowing that that's okay, but also knowing that the longer we stay in those environments, the more our mental health is going to take a toll. Okay, I want to just do a quick moment, if you're listening to this episode, to just take a deep breath, because this is heavy stuff. And I think that when we feel all these things at once, and when we're at the beginning of kind of healing our mental health, it can feel like the weight of the world is on our shoulders. I remember when I first started to eliminate things out of my life and I started to make shifts and I started to focus on, better things that were more in alignment. It's also really overwhelming when all our body recognizes is chaos and overwhelm. When we remove ourselves from chaos, our body's almost like, this is weird. Where's that heightened state? Why am I not triggered right now? And so knowing that it can also feel really weird when our mental health is good, but knowing that we're deserving of that. And just because it doesn't feel normal doesn't mean that it's okay. In fact, it's not. And we need to work even harder to get ourselves to that place because you're so worthy to get there. Okay. 2 more. Number 4, physically look after yourself. I know that this one can be hard. Again, especially when you don't feel worthy to look after yourself or when you're in a hard mindset. When I got out of my basketball experience, which if you've never heard my story, I'll share it very quickly. I went to college to play basketball, and I had a coach that was unfortunately very emotionally abusive, very psychologically just messed me up. And after I had stepped away from that team, I had gone into such a state of freeze and overwhelm and just needing so much comfort because I was hurting so bad. I ended up gaining almost 50 pounds. And so if someone had told me at that time, you need to look after yourself, I'd have been like, frig you. You don't know what I'm going through. So here's what I want to say. Know that when we don't look after ourselves physically, all it's doing is making our mental health worse. And I know that in those moments, seeking comfort is what we might need. But I think when we can just even have the consciousness that things are affecting us and are harming us more than they're benefiting us, I think it allows us to just recognize for ourselves and be more mindful of the choices that we make. So much of this comes down to your relationship with yourself. And if you don't feel like you can truly love yourself, this makes me emotional to talk about, to be honest, because I'm just thinking of that 19-year-old version of me who just needed permission to know that you're worthy to look after yourself. You're worthy to move your body. You don't need to be scared. I know that you're scared, and I know that this is hard, but it's okay. And so if anybody listening is just resonating with this and feeling like maybe you overcorrect or undercorrect in regards to your physical health, I encourage you to just start really, really small. But knowing that physically looking after ourselves is one of the best ways that we can build our mental health, because we're showing ourselves that we care about ourselves. We're showing up for ourselves, which is the most important thing. Our mental health is almost always better when we feel our best. Think of times when you wake up and all you want to do is shower and change your clothes, and then as soon as you're done, you're like, oh, I feel so much better. That's because physically looking after ourselves is a form of self-love. It's something we get to do for us. And so start small and build. And maybe you have a better relationship with this. Maybe you're hearing this one, you're like, oh, I got it. That's easy. That's also okay too. But also know that physically looking after yourself, meaning general body maintenance. So getting your teeth clean, getting your eyes looked at, doing body checks, moving your body, nourishing your body, eating things that make you feel good, consuming water, limiting alcohol and drugs, doing all those things is going to impact your mental health in a positive way 100% of the time. I was going to say 9 times out of 10. No, 100% of the time that is going to positively impact your mental health. And so I just want you to know that if you have a harder relationship with that, it likely just comes from shame. And I want you to know that you are so worthy to work on that. And I hope that you can find someone to work with that empowers you and allows you to feel safe to start that process. Okay, the last one, number 5, focus on the things you love. Today is a great example of this for me, where my mental health was struggling a little bit today. But I know that every single time I jump on the microphone, there's a part of me that's always happier because I love that I get to do this. What are the things in your life that you know that when you do them, they always make you feel better? And again, we don't want to overswing this and spend too much time just doing things that we love, because that can also then hinder our mental health if we get too comfortable. But we all have unique things that make us who we are and that shape who you are and that fill your cup. And when our mental health is struggling, it's sometimes hard for us to prioritize the things that we love. We kind of neglect them and put them aside. Whenever you do a certain action that makes you feel better, I encourage you to have that written down in your back pocket for on the harder days. And again, all of these are about being proactive as possible. So yes, on the harder days, it's important that we have coping strategies and things that we can do to get us through. But how are you able to set yourself up to live a life where you are embracing often the things that make you you and that make you happy? I think that is so underestimated, because again, that shame comes in and it makes us feel like we're not worthy of those things. You are worthy to do things that you love and to invest time in doing the things that you love. So those are the 5 things, the 5 ways that I wrote down for you guys to be more proactive in your mental health and to tend to your mental health. So thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode of Rewire to Inspire. I hope that you take some time to just take a deep breath, honor yourself, honor what might have surfaced today, and know that you're so worthy to implement each of these things and more into your life so that you can focus on your mental health. So sending you all so much extra love and gratitude, and I look forward to chatting with you all on Thursday. Bye, you guys.